Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to this week's episode of the Legal Beagle podcast. This week, we're joined all the way from Ann Arbor, Michigan, by one of my favorite people in the entire world, Mr. Gary Chambers. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, man. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I'm glad you agreed to do this. So as most of you know, unless you've had your head in a sandbox, the watershed moment in the NCAA has occurred. And what has occurred is the ability for players now to profit off of their name, image, and likeness. It's short, the abbreviation is NIL. And colleges now are trying to scramble to put in compliance policies and make it available to students so they can go ahead and do this under certain restrictions. State laws are still applying. In fact, here in Arizona, there was just a new bill that the governor signed into law that allows for this to occur. And the reason I wanted to invite Gary onto the podcast is because he's a former athlete at Arizona State University. He went on to play in the NFL for a brief time, and now he's back in the college world working as a strength coach and a grad student for Eastern Michigan. So, Gary, if you don't mind, I just want to jump right in and get your thoughts on some of this stuff.
Yeah, let's jump into it, of course.
So, back when you were a student athlete, which probably seems like a lifetime ago, but really wasn't that long ago, what was your understanding of your ability to profit off of your name, image, or likeness? Was that discussed, or was there any sort of restrictions, or were you guys told, hey, look, you guys can't go off and get sponsorship deals on the side? How did that work?
Yeah, I would say the majority of the discussion was what not to do and what we can't do. A lot of times stuff falls back on the university and you start talking about what at the time was, a big violation or could get us in trouble. That was a focus when it came to that topic. Pretty much anything that we wanted to do that involved money just had to go through compliance. There was really, if you wanted to go pick up a second job, you had to make sure it was okay. You had to go fill the paperwork out and go through compliance. If it came down to, any really ownership of anything, it was always a sticky conversation and topic. So a lot of times, as players, it was easier for them to say, hey, just stay out of it, focus on school, focus on, your sport, and we won't have any trouble.
Well, so let me ask, you're a scholarship athlete. You were highly recruited at ASU. You actually went there and graduated, which congrats, because a lot of student athletes do not get their degree when they're playing at a university. So you're given this scholarship, and there's been this long argument from one side of the table saying, look, you're a student athlete, you're given a scholarship, we're paying your way to go to school here. That should be enough. And on the other side are these student athletes that have for years said, okay, I can appreciate that, but you guys are $1 billion industry. The NCAA is $1 billion industry, and you're making money off of us and our ability to create entertainment and compete at a very high level. Were there, even back when you were a student athlete, were there conversations among you and your teammates about, hey man, this isn't fair?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You start to look at, going to Arizona State, I was fortunate enough to play around some, just elite athletes and some guys who, have had very successful careers professionally. And you start to think about some of the big time recruits that ASU has brought in. And the just amount of exposure that they get, you start thinking about ticket sales and jersey sales. And when I was in school, actually, I think I was right around the time when they stopped making the NCAA video game for football because it once again got into our likeness and, you have my number, you play for my school, all the attributes are the same. There's a wide receiver with dreads out there, but it's not him, but we're still selling this game and making a big profit off of it. So we would definitely talk about it. I wrote papers about it while I was in school. It's tough. There's just a lot of different ways you can take it, and everybody has their own lens. So being the athlete and kind of being in that part of your life and doing what you're doing, you definitely do start to have different, feelings towards what's actually fair and what's not fair. And not even just for football. There was some I think when I was in college still, I went to school with John Rahm, and he was playing, he was golfing. And I think there was at one point he couldn't accept, something for a tournament he won or something that they wanted to give him. And it was kind of like, well, you're an amateur, and that's just how the NCAA works. And when you look at people who come from different backgrounds and, have different feelings towards all of that stuff, it definitely is. It's a tough conversation for amongst your peers, I guess.
Well, it's interesting you bring up the NCAA football game because I grew up playing that, and didn't even give it a thought as just a fan of athletics and just a fan of college football. Never even gave it a thought that I'm using teams and that I was a big fan of, right? ASU, or at the time, I think, God, this will date me, but Nebraska was a powerhouse, and so I'd play with these different guys like Tommy Frazier that was just a lights out quarterback. Not thinking that Tommy Frazier isn't making a dime off of this stuff.
Yeah, not a dime.
And so, no, not a dime. And so in 2019, Ed O'Bannon, who played basketball for UCLA, brought a lawsuit against the NCAA and EA Sports for use of his name, image, likeness, and really turned it into a class action for all athletes at the time. Yeah. It didn't necessarily change a lot for the NCAA, but it did do what you just said, which is it made EA Sports jump out of NCAA football and basketball and stop producing those games. But I read recently, there's an article that just came out that they're going to produce a game starting in 2023. It'll still be around college athletics, but it won't have any similarity to any specific player. So let's say there's a receiver for ASU. That receiver won't have dreads. They won't be able to identify that was Gary Chambers. It'll just simply be they'll partner with the NCAA and universities to use their school colors and logos, but they won't
stadiums.
Stadiums, but it won't have no player will be described. They'll all look the same, which is kind of weird, right? I mean, kind of weird. But
the whole point I play the game is because I'm a fan, and don't get me wrong, I wanted to play as myself in NCAA. I thought that was cool. Like, of course, or like if you're a fan of your team and you follow the players and take hold of all of that stuff, that kind of defeats the purpose a little bit to me. But at the same time, it might be fun.
Yeah. So then fast forward, so that started in 2009. Fast forward to 2014. That's when Sean Alston, who was a running back at West Virginia, brings this class action against the NCAA for what were called educational benefits. So at the time, you couldn't, as a grad student, be paid. Couldn't do it. The NCAA wouldn't allow it. You can't do it. You couldn't get laptops for school that were paid for by the university because it was an NCAA violation. So he brings this lawsuit on behalf of the entire student athletic body across the country and says, this isn't right. This lawsuit just got resolved a few months ago. I mean, this lawsuit, and there's some confusion because the Alston lawsuit is not the lawsuit that allows for students to profit off of their NIL. It is just a lawsuit that says the Supreme Court went all the way to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said in a 9-0 decision, you are not, it basically was an antitrust lawsuit. And they said to the NCAA, you are not allowed to treat student athletes as property that can't be compensated for their educational needs. And it was really they upheld a decision by a judge out of California, Christine Wilkin, that said that and put an injunction in place, said these student athletes can get educational benefits. They can have money set aside for their career beyond athletics in college. And from that, along the way, over the last 7 years or so, has been this evolution in the NCAA, which is now allowing for players to profit off of their name, image, and likeness. So my question for you, before I dive into, I actually got some of the policies from the Arizona State University Compliance Office, and I want to go through those with you. But before I go through them line by line, I want to ask you, back when you were at school, and if this had come out, what would have been your thought? Would it have been, I need to find an agent to represent me? Would it have been, how do I hook up with sponsors that I can make money off of? How would you have treated this if I can take you back in time and say, let's say this moment would have occurred while you were a student athlete?
Yeah. That's a hard one to answer because, hindsight is always 2020. And I think a little bit more as a business owner now since I am one. But I think at the time, At the time, I would have probably leaned a lot on my teammates and the people around me. I think, the people that I spent the most time with, that I, had the most discussion with, and that I brainstormed the most with, just in them being my teammates and my brothers and us being so close, would have been very, it would have been very beneficial to me, because I had multiple teammates who were wanting to, and who, maybe before getting to ASU, had merch. They had their own clothing, brands, and they had their own this, that, and the next, that they couldn't really do anything with anymore. They had to, oh, well, it's actually my cousins, and they make all the money, and they do, have to give up a lot of that kind of stuff. And I think some of those, and some of my teammates, it would have probably been good for me to be able to brainstorm and sit down and talk with them about different things we could do. And then I think I would have definitely tried to make the most of, I guess, being local, and what I could do in my city and around me that might be beneficial. It would be a lot to learn at the age that I was, but I definitely probably would have actually made more steps in figuring out what it is that I might want to do, or how I could personally benefit off of having my name, image, and likeness. So it would have opened up a lot of, I guess, opportunity in my own head to go different directions. And I probably would have just started plucking away and trying things, which was something that I never felt comfortable to do, or was never allowed to. So it was an afterthought. It wasn't, I didn't really start venturing off into how I can make money, or how I can, do for myself, until after college.
Well, and you bring up an interesting point, and I'll even date you a bit here. Back when you were a student athlete, social media wasn't what it is today. It was around,
yeah.
but it wasn't what it is today, meaning you now can be paid just to influence people through the posts that you have on your social media platforms. That was probably maybe it wasn't as impressive as it is now, right? I mean, now it's like we just know it exists, and there's a lot of people that get paid and make a lot of money just influencing groups of people. But you bring up a point that I think is something that needs to be considered, and that's, you talked about your age. You said at that age, I don't know how I would have handled a lot of these things. I wonder, and what I don't want to see, what I hope does not happen, because there's been this feeling by a lot of student athletes, and I think you're right to say it's not just football players, not just the big programs. It's across the board, from volleyball to golf to gymnastics, all the different programs at colleges. But there's this feeling of, we've been exploited, right? We've been exploited. Now my concern is, what if the exploitation just changes? What if it's just now businesses exploiting student athletes, and really they're the ones making the money, and the student athletes feel like they're getting some involvement now because, hey, I can promote myself. But it really just turns into these big companies finding a different way to exploit student athletes. And that's the concern that I hope is being thought about by some of these student athletes. Because you're right, you have this young group of people. They're typically really just out of high school, and they're in their late teens to early 20s.
18, 22.
Yeah. And you're being now approached with contracts from these businesses saying, hey, we want to pay you. And on one hand, you're thinking, that's great, I can finally profit off this. On the other hand, you're thinking, is that fair? Is that like what I should be getting paid? I don't know the answer to that. But I hope the exploitation doesn't just shift from the NCAA exploiting student athletes to now businesses are just going to exploit student athletes. I don't know. I don't know how you guard against that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't really know how you guard against it. I definitely think there'll be a little bit of a lagging period where it'll have to be figured out. And that, of course, whenever money's involved, there's usually somebody out there trying to have more for them and less for you. So I think that especially, like you say, the age group, it's hard to know and understand how to even, deal with all of that stuff. And I could definitely see things going super deep down a rabbit hole as to, we were talking about big money at a college level. And then things just kind of keep shifting. They shift lower because, if the possibility of you making money like this is there, and you're a pretty big time recruit, or, you're high school standout. Well, now these people are going to actually start looking even at a younger age and saying, hey, we can offer you with these deals and this, that, and the next. So I definitely see it being a possibility. I always like to look at it as we know what's been going on has not worked in the benefit of most of these student athletes. So even if there are some hoops and hurdles, we can figure out what won't work in another way.
No, you're bringing up a great point. And I have a question. When you were a student athlete, did you have, so ASU had a deal with some big shoemaker, whether it was Nike, Adidas, whoever, you had to wear their shoes or their apparel, correct?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
So I'm just thinking out loud as you said that. I thought this is a fantastic point that you're making. If you're a high school student and you're a phenom, what if you ink a deal with Nike, but you go to a school that is Adidas? Mm-hmm. I mean, the ASU policy is clear. You can't wear any apparel that is contradictory to contracts they already have in place. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to be able to promote Nike through the school, meaning you can't wear their apparel at school or through school promotions. Kind of like what we were talking about before we even started this podcast about you wearing gear that doesn't necessarily relate to your current job, right?
Yeah.
You couldn't do that. You could wear it on social media. You could certainly do advertisements, but it creates this weird dynamic. If I'm watching Gary Chambers and he's a Nike sponsored athlete and that's all I see, but then on the field, he's wearing Adidas.
Yeah.
I wonder if that causes confusion in the marketplace among consumers that are trying to because like you said, I'm a fan of you. So I want to watch you play. I want to have the stuff you have because I want to be great like you, even though I'm just, a fan.
Yeah.
I wonder how that's going to play out. And I think the lag period is a really important point you're bringing up because I think you're going to see this really awkward time until everyone kind of wraps their arms around things.
Yeah, definitely. It'll definitely be a lot to figure out and how to, fill in some of those holes. But I think, it's going to be a professional model and they figure it out on that realm. And I don't think that they'll have too much trouble figuring it out at the collegiate level. Billions of dollars, like you said, being made and put into thought and all of this stuff. The same way, I think, what is it? The NBA is sponsored by Bose, but a lot of the players are sponsored by Beats by Dre, and then for a while there was this big thing where, you can't come through the tunnel wearing your Beats. We're sponsored by Bose. So figure it out, but you can still collect your sponsorships and put it on your social media. And, not to jump too far ahead, but I definitely think eventually to kind of straighten out some of these rules, they're going to just start putting a lot of this stuff in kids' scholarships. When it comes time to sign, you're going to be either signing whatever rights or whether you can sell it. Or I don't know how they'll end up doing all of that kind of stuff. But that's kind of how I could imagine things going, and it just being one of those, you're going to have to pick and choose what's right. Because it goes the other way too. Hey, we're a Nike school and we'll give you this Nike deal. If you end up coming to one of these two schools, you can, accept this. And it's like, well, that changes a lot, too. So I don't know. It's interesting. I definitely, like you said, that lag period will be a wild time just to see how everything kind of does play out.
It's going to be like that period of time where we were all in between, like, I guess, junior high for most of us and high school, where you started to, develop a little bit, and you went through that awkward stage where you didn't really your arms were longer than your body, and everyone's growing at a different pace. That's what this is going to be like, right? It's going to be like puberty. It's going to be like this weird lag time where everyone's like, I don't know how to do this, and then all of a sudden, I think you're right. There's going to be big money behind it. And big money that is going to want to be a part of it. And so I think you're right. You're going to see big deals put into place. I want to talk a little bit about this ASU policy that was just adopted on June 30th. So recently, just a couple of days ago. And here's some things that they have in their compliance policy. And I just want to get your thoughts on this. So probably not surprising to you. You cannot wear any of your school apparel or use the school logos in any way to promote your name, image, and likeness. Is that surprising to you at all?
No, not at all.
Yeah. You can use colors. So you could use for Eastern Michigan. And I don't want to step on any toes because I have not reviewed Eastern Michigan's compliance policy, but their colors green and white, and they obviously have their primary colors. You could use your colors. You could use maroon and gold at ASU, but you cannot put the logo on anything, and you cannot actually wear the school issued apparel. So you were 81, right? As a receipt, you couldn't even wear your number. Can't even wear your number. So they really try to limit it a little bit. Here's what gets a little weird. You have to, as a student athlete, report any agreement that you're going to put in place within 10 days of that agreement. So you don't have to go ahead of time, like you were talking about earlier, to compliance and ask if you can do it, but you have to report it within 10 days. However, ASU will not take any position, negotiate any contract, or do anything to support you in the agreement you make to promote your own name, image, or likeness. But they will slap you with a violation and report you to the NCAA if you do something you're not supposed to do. Isn't that weird? That's kind of weird, right?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I guess it's understandable, but it is a little weird.
Yeah, we're not going to help you at all, but if you screw up, we're gonna report you, and you're going to possibly be either suspended or have some sort of violation on your record from the NCAA. Here are the categories. And just tell me if any of these are surprising to you, because I have some thoughts on a few of these. These are the categories you cannot endorse as a student athlete at ASU. Every school will have their own policy.
Okay.
No alcohol. Surprising?
Not really.
Not really. But let's say sports bars are huge companies that make money off of people watching sports there on Saturdays and Sundays. Let's say a sports bar wants to hire Gary Chambers to be their student representative, their student athlete, because they know you're big in the local community and they want people to say, hey, look, he comes here, and they could do that. But if there's any logo for any alcohol company at all, beer, wine, hard alcohol, or otherwise, on that, which is usually how it works, you would have committed a violation under ASU's policies for compliance. Isn't that weird? So like if you're promoting a bar, whatever bar, and it's not that you're promoting go drink here, you're just promoting it's a sports bar and it's a cool place to go and maybe they have great wings. But if they have a logo on there for Budweiser, you've now violated your compliance with ASU. This is where I think student athletes need to be very, very careful, because you were talking earlier, and I love the example, is I would rely on my boys and the people I trust in my inner circle. But you don't know anything. And if you do the wrong thing, you're going to be in trouble. I'm not saying they need to run to an attorney. I'm saying they should really read through these things and think about these things, because you may sign an agreement with the sports bar and say, okay, guys, look, I can't have any alcohol. And they're like, yeah, that's fine. And they show you promoting their, wing special on Saturday, come here and watch the games. But then all of a sudden there's a second part of the ad that shows like their beer specials. You committed a violation, and you're like, I didn't promote that. I wasn't like promoting their beer, but you have committed a violation. So it's just weird things that I think athletes need to think about. Student athletes need to think about when they're engaging in these agreements, because the ASU compliance office is not going to help you. They're not going to negotiate. They're not going to hire anyone to help you. I would probably say this without knowing this. I don't think they want student athletes to engage in these contracts. They want them to play sports for that. They don't want them to go make money off of their name, image, and likeness. But I say that without having someone on to counter that. Hey, if ASU compliance watches this blog, come on, we'll have a conversation about it.
Invite me back so I can.
Yeah, exactly. We'll have the three of us, Gary, you, and me. Okay, here's some other categories. No gambling at all.
Yeah, surprising? I see that. Not at all.
But what about DraftKings? DraftKings is now legal in most states. It's going to be legal nationwide very soon. They have deals with all the major professional sports leagues like basketball and football and baseball. So you can't endorse DraftKings or FanDuel or any of these big gambling facilities. What are your thoughts?
That's a hard one, because anytime you start talking about gambling, it's very touchy, and especially in the sports world. I think that it definitely goes into maturity. You start to speak on, just how capable are some of these young people in making the right decisions and big time moments with a lot at stake, I guess. And the gambling world, it seems to be that, And I also think that there's just in collegiate sports, there's so many schools. There's so many, different levels and different conferences and different, I guess, access points. So when I start thinking about gambling and how like, I guess, how big of a part it could be in just college or collegiate athletics, it's kind of it makes you a little bit nervous. I definitely see I see the NCAA and I see college athletics trying their best to keep everything as amateur as possible, even though we're kind of moving into a more of a professional model. So I can see them still trying to keep that aside and separate and not have it be part of things, because it just gets super deep. And I feel like it goes from my name on an ad for DraftKings all the way down to, well, I'm getting money to put into this, or I'm communicating with the wrong people, and I feel like it's a little bit hard to treat some of those case by case. So they'll probably do their best to try to keep it all out.
Yeah, I know. I don't disagree with you on that one. But what about this one? What about marijuana or marijuana-related products? Anything with cannabis? Here's what I'll bring up. I'm not talking about the recreational use of marijuana or even the medicinal use of marijuana. Let's talk about CBD oils that have been known. And you and I have talked about this offline about some of the stuff and whether it actually works. But there are people that use that stuff for muscle aches, for things that would help them recover from student athletics. This says no. What do you think about that?
It all goes back to the image of the institution. Simple as that. And I think that marijuana products, even CBD, all of that, THC, whatever the case is, I think it is still so new in how accepted it may or may not be. And I think the higher you start to go into some of these, you start talking about donors and boosters and alum and this, that, and the next, and where a lot of some of these funds come from and sponsorships. I highly doubt they want an individual athlete, bringing any kind of negative shade to what we got going on elsewhere. And I tell people, it's kind of like, or compliance maybe in this case, but I was listening to something the other day and they were talking about how, HR is designed to protect the company, not you. So they'll tell you to come speak to us so we can figure this out before it messes up how we look. And I look at it the same for a lot of these schools. They probably don't care. Shoot, they used to follow LT to the crack house just to make sure he was safe.
That's so true. That's a true story.
It's a true story, and I don't think a lot of people care to that point, as long as it's not just super detrimental to the athlete, or it's not, whatever else. I don't think that it's that big of a scare for some people, but I think when you look at the big picture of what do we represent, what's our mission here, who are we as a school, as a campus, and what are we known as, you don't want to bring any different shade, whether you feel that way or not, through your athletes, kind of promoting and allowing that to be a part of things. Now you're getting free products, and now it's getting into, well, am I allowed to even consume this and be on the team? And now you start talking about, oh, they got suspended for something that they promote and that's legal in your state or not. I mean, better than I do. That rabbit hole of possibilities probably just goes on and on. So it's not too surprising to me. Do I agree necessarily? I don't know. I think you give and take with everything. It won't be necessarily a perfect system, especially not from the start. So there's definitely some things that they're going to just pretty much give you a flat no on. And I think, you got to make your decisions from there. Will I be able to accept any other deal? What image do I want as a player? And those are kind of the things you got to start asking yourself anyways.
What about, you make some fair points there. I don't want to gloss over that, because I agree with you on the slippery slope argument that could create.
Yeah.
So they say no other schools. And at the first when I read that, I was like, no other schools. Of course, you're an ASU athlete. Why are you? I'm just using ASU as a placeholder because this is their compliance rules. course you wouldn't promote another school. But then I thought about Larry Fitzgerald promoting University of Phoenix. I get it. He was in the NFL. He wasn't promoting it while he was in college, but it's kind of, to me, that's a little weird. What if another educational institution like a University of Phoenix or an online school says, look, I can help this student athlete prepare for law school, prepare for whatever they're going to do after they leave their undergrad, start working on grad credits, maybe simultaneous to working on your undergrad program. I'm just thinking out loud. I don't know, but it seems I see the conflict. I see the apparent conflict. I do. If you're an ASU athlete and all of a sudden you're promoting U of A, that's weird. That's weird. And I see why that they wouldn't want that. Yeah. But there's a lot of schools. It designates any online school. It says any other online institution. Those aren't really in competition with universities. I mean, let's just use Eastern Michigan. They have athletic departments. Online schools don't have athletics.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily see the conflict. What are your thoughts on schools?
Your R still. You know,
are you drinking the Kool-Aid there in Ann Arbor? What are you doing?
We want to give you your likeness. Of course, we want to, of course the rules are changed and we want to abide by them. You own your name, you own your image. All of that is fine and dandy. But at the end of the day, the reason that you'll even be able to profit off of this is because, you're known as such and such athlete who attends our university. And, that is what it is. So anytime your name pops up, go ahead. If you're allowed to make money off of it, make money off of it. But we want the reason to be because ASU is known.
Right. No, I agree.
And I think they'll bend a little bit, but schools are probably going to do their best to keep as much as they can, right here, and to say, if I Google you, University of Phoenix is not popping up. No matter what, it's going to be ASU that's popping up, and you're going to say this person does that there. Let me look into what the programs they have. Let me look into their undergraduate studies or their graduate school. And I think that's probably just their way of trying to keep the focus, on their specific university.
So I don't disagree. Let me ask, this one gets weird. Now, there's a couple other ones that firearms and tobacco and strip clubs, and you and I would probably agree on a lot of those things and the image that it's creating for the university or college. But what about this one? What about political beliefs? This one's weird to me because I'm not just talking political as in mainstream Democrat versus Republican. I'm talking about political beliefs, Black Lives Matter, taking a stand on things. They're saying you absolutely can't endorse those things. So now there's this weird, and just follow me on this for a second, Gary. There's this weird situation where if you're profiting off of your name, image, or likeness related to some sort of political stance, that's a no-go. However, if you want to make a political stance, they're not censoring you because that would be a violation of your First Amendment right. They're saying you can promote and speak for how you feel, but you cannot make money off of it.
Make money off of it, yeah.
What do you think of that? That one's weird, right?
That one's weird, yeah. That one's interesting. That one's interesting, and it's weird to me because I guess for them it wouldn't really matter if you were only doing it to make profit. I guess that still has nothing really to do with them as a school. Once again, I think maybe the timing of how all of this is landing and where we are as a society right now and in our country, it might be easier for them to say, let's try our best to cut all of that out. I think that the access is just so crazy. I mean, social media and just, what we can, I guess, literally accomplish from our phone seems just to be endless. So I could definitely see, depending on where you are or where the school is, and what are the feelings and the political stance of the area and all of the rest of that, you might be swayed through money to promote or put some of these things out there, which see, that's hard because I'm like, why does the school care?
I agree with you. Look, colleges are melting pots. You and I both went to school. They're melting pots for the way people think and feel. And a lot of political movements that have occurred in our country started on college campuses.
Yeah, a lot of them.
But a lot of them. But colleges themselves, like you said, don't have any political leanings because an entity can't really have one in a way, right? You're saying they don't have any political leanings. Their student body makes up a lot of the way that these colleges are maybe identified, but there are people all over the map on how they think and feel and how they identify with different movements or political leanings. I'm with you. I want to be a fly on the wall during this meeting with ASU compliance when someone said, "Oh yeah, category that we don't want students to profit off of political." And I want to know what they were thinking because I don't understand that one at all. And I do agree with you. Do you want to get paid for your political beliefs? Maybe not, but maybe. And what does it have to do with school? What does it have to do with school?
Protect our image. Protect our image is how I look at, the school putting things out there. How we still want you to be now the rules have changed, so we have to kind of bend and go with some of these and figure out the best platform to use and the best way we can approach it. How can we be tactful? But I think a lot of it kind of just dwindles down to how can we protect our image as a school and how can we protect our image as a team. If football makes us the majority of the money that's coming into our athletic department, our athletic program, how can we keep that on the most straight and narrow and in the most control that we can kind of weave and keep the optics right. And that's what I kind of tend to put it kind of dial it all up to, which I might be wrong, but
I think you're right. And it's why I'm so glad that I'm able to talk to you on this podcast about it, because I think if you're listening to this as a student athlete and you're hearing what Gary's saying, please understand, if you're going to be woke, this has not changed. This is just shifted things. What I hear you saying, Gary, is this is the exploitation is now just moved into different ways, and the school is every school is going to have compliance rules like this, and they're going to be very specific about what you're able to do. This is not a free for all. This is not a moment in time where you get to just make as much money as you can. There are going to be a lot of restrictions, and I would encourage you as student athletes to talk to people you trust, get legal guidance if that becomes necessary. Find former athletes that you can actually listen to and say, what am I missing, or what am I not aware of, or what should I be thinking about? I imagine that this is going to evolve and continue to evolve. I think you're spot on, Gary, in your opinion that there's this weird period of time that we're going to enter, and we're in it already, and there's some things that need to be flushed out. But I want to ask you some questions about the future and just get your opinions. This is not anything but your feelings on where we're going. Do you think we will see a pay-for-play model in college athletics in our lifetime?
I could see it. I definitely could see it happening. I don't think we're super, super far off. And I think there's just a lot of great minds in the college age. And I think a lot of people come from, really great backgrounds. And it's almost like you were just saying, it's going to evolve over time. And I do think that right now it's almost like, the gold rush, like everybody going to California, trying to figure out how can we make this work and, what is going to be a right system, the right platform. But I do think that it's going to be that back and forth between, I'm the athlete, I'm the player, I'm generating a lot of this profit, and we're the institution, we're the school, we're giving you the platform. You're here to, we're giving you opportunity. And I think it's going to go back and forth. It'll be a little bit of a tug of war, and sooner or later they'll find something that, might stick for the next however many years until somebody's not happy with it again.
and it'll change again, right?
And it'll change again. Exactly. Because I don't think anything's perfect. As much as, believe me, I'm a student athlete, I have been saying for years, pay these players. They deserve it. Like, these players deserve to at least be able to make money off of their craft, what they do. And I wholeheartedly believe it is complete BS that a student athlete can reach such a height in college athletics. And realistically, the majority of playing your sport happens probably up into college if you're lucky, before you're a professional, before you can profit off of it. So I think there's zero reason that any player can give so much to anywhere and give so much to the sport and then graduate college and have no direction and have no real setup for life, which happens way too often. So it's good to see some of this stuff happening, and it wouldn't completely surprise me if we made it into that kind of a model, especially with the amount of money that is already pushed into sports in our country, and especially with, I think, how social media, how, the tech and I don't know if we're in the digital age, but you understand what I mean, is just continuing to evolve and continuing to, get bigger and change how people go about things. It wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me too much. Sooner or later, the millennials will be, in there running, calling some of these shots in the front office. So they might have something else to say about it.
You're right. And I'll use something that you said to me a long time ago that stuck with me. And you talked about athletics in general. This wasn't just student athletics. This was athletics. And you said, as an athlete, you're kind of a mercenary. Get yours while you can get it. And I don't disagree. And I think you're highlighting that even for student athletes now, because there is a limited time. And most of them are not going to get to play professionally like you were fortunate to do. Most of them are not going to have a future laid out for them. They're going to have to go fight and figure it out for themselves. And if you can make some money to set aside to make that journey easier, then I think you should be able to do that. And I understand the restrictions, and I understand why there should be compliance, and it can't just be the wild, wild west. I think you're right. We're absolutely in a gold rush, but eventually that rush will end and we'll have some direction. I just hope that on the other side of this, student athletes are still in a power position, because what I'm afraid of is it's just going to be big business is going to become a controlling factor in this. And I understand they have the money, but the players bring the product and the entertainment. And if they don't forget that, and they're not unaware of that fact, and they are willing to work together to support each other, to raise everyone up, then this could be a great moment for student athletes, and will continue to be great for student athletes into the future. Before we wrap it up, I have a question. What parting thought would you give to a student athlete who happens to tune into this podcast and says, I want to hear what Gary has to say about this. I'm a freshman going into a school, and I don't know anything about any of this, but I want to do it the right way, and I want to take care of myself, but I also don't want to get in trouble. What would you tell that young student athlete?
You spoke on it a little bit. Hopefully, if they have somebody in their corner, or somebody, who they trust that they can speak to, start bouncing these ideas around and just do your research. It's not going to be easy. I don't know all the answers, just like I'm sure an 18-year-old coming out of high school does not know the answers, and it's one thing being told you're just a great athlete and just, knowing that you're good at your sport and, you're going to school to play it. But it's another thing, a bunch of money being pushed at you. And I think that can be, very overwhelming for a young person. So I say just learn as much as you can about the process that you're in, and try your best to take it slow. Don't be super, spontaneous maybe in diving into something that you think, might be it right away. But the more you can kind of have some knowledge and sharpen yourself up on and what is happening right now and what's going on and how you can for sure benefit from it. You're right. I think I still hold that same belief. Get as much as you can out of this time. Get as much as you can. I would joke with people. I'm like, there's people right now who just have my signature just in their house. You know what I mean? And I just like sitting there. And at one time, it meant something, and if I could have profited off of just, who I was and what I was doing, I think that's A-okay. But you can definitely probably put yourself in a hole, and you don't want, you don't want to set yourself back going after something that isn't necessarily the main goal. Of course, getting your education should still be priority number one. Of course, playing your sport and being fortunate enough to play your sport at a high level is still what you look for, and going to school and having that opportunity to set yourself up later in life is always the number one goal. And this is going to be, or can be, I guess, something that can 100% aid in that. You can set yourself up now while you do have a different status than you may have for the rest of your life, or while you do have some of these resources around you, while you do have people wanting to reach out and help you in these different ways or work with you. Take advantage of it all, but be tactful in just how you approach some of the stuff. And you might not know, I'm sure there's going to be plenty of mistakes and all the rest that goes on and happens in it. But the more the better off you are, and that's in most most areas. So I say just do your best and talk to compliance. They'll tell you their side and get whatever you get from their side, and then go talk to, somebody who isn't associated with the school and see what they have to say about it, and compare the two, and then take your own opinion from that. And if there's more questions you have, there's always somebody to reach out to. It just depends on how much you care and how much, how far you want to take it, I guess. But I tell our students here, I tell student athletes all the time, use your resources as best you can. And if you feel like you don't know or don't have any resources, start at step number one. Who's the closest to you? Ask your coach. And they might point you in the direction of somebody else, and just kind of keep following the trail. The decisions are always going to be ours at the end of the day. And that's what I love about this. It actually gives a student athlete a chance for some of the power is in my hand. At one point, it didn't really matter what my name was worth. There was really nothing I could do with it without just clearly breaking a rule and getting, the school in trouble, myself in trouble. And the majority of us don't hold enough weight for that to be an issue anyways. But now, since there's so many different ways, because it doesn't even have to be your sport. If you want to own a business, you can own a business now. If you want to go be a model, you're allowed to model now. And some of the things that people weren't allowed to do, they can. So since it is true, attack some of your interests. Attack some of the things that you're into that you never really even thought about, and see where that road takes you.
That's such a great piece of advice on so many different levels and for so many different reasons. I really hope that if you just heard that, go back and replay that few minutes of Gary giving you really good advice for a lot of different reasons. Don't lose sight of why you're there in the first place. Don't be afraid to ask questions and find the resources you need. I'll tell you, where was that stat I found? Oh, I know what your name, image, and likeness is worth, according to the NCAA. And this is just the organization, not all of the different conferences and the money they make as individual schools. But in 2019, your name, image, and likeness was worth $1.18 billion, according to the NCAA. So that's what it's worth. There's a lot of money out there, and they should not be the only ones profiting. I think we probably agree on that. So, Gary, I can't thank you enough for being my guest on this week's episode. As this area continues to evolve, continues to figure itself out, I'd love to have you back and talk more about this as just kind of an ongoing explanation to those that are following this story and wanting to be more involved and wanting to be more educated on this topic. I'd love to have you back to do an update later on down the road as we know more and as things kind of take shape, if you're open to it.
Oh man, I would love to. I mean, I feel like it just keeps going and keeps going. And like you said, things are going to continue to progress and change as the process goes on. In my head, I mean, for me, let me ask you a question. I feel like since there are so many different rules state to state right now, do you feel like this eventually will have to be across the board, like federal laws that are going to be put in place? Do you think it'll go there in court?
I do. And I think the NCAA is already actually pushing for that. They're saying we need more uniformity because we do operate across all 50 states and there is compliance from all different types of institutions. To have ASU compliance be ASU and Eastern Michigan be Eastern Michigan, and then have each state have their own laws. What happens if you go and travel to Wisconsin like your Eagles are going to get to do this year? And in Wisconsin, those laws are different. And somehow there's some sort of promotion that happens where maybe one of your student athletes is promoting a product, a brand that is national, and they happen to promote it in Wisco at a press conference or whatever they're able to do. And that's a violation of Wisconsin law. I mean, that's what we're facing with marijuana. That's why you're seeing so much tension between the federal and the state laws with marijuana. Because as you said, some it's legal places, other places it's not. It's only medicinal. Some places you can't even use it for anything. It does pose a big challenge for student athletes and a big challenge for these schools and for the NCAA. And I think from what I've been reading, there is this push to make it uniform, to make it so that there is some clarity for student athletes, for schools, and for the NCAA on a federal level. Because I think you're right. Otherwise, it's just going to be a mess.
It's going to be a mess. And I think we need it. Especially, I don't know if you're familiar with the trade portal and how all of that has changed. But, now athletes actually have the ability to, to transfer and go to different schools without being, losing time or being having to miss years and this, that, and the next. And I think that is really big. Now you start talking about, I can make this in this state and do this. And I spent a year here, kind of growing my name or doing whatever, but now money could possibly have me transfer schools. I think this is going to be, it's going to be an interesting topic for some years to come, to be honest. But it's exciting. It's exciting. I'm happy to see something new. I'm happy to see something different. And I do think that it's a push in the direction for the student athlete, and to actually, a little bit of a push for some more fairness. Talk about 1.8 billion. I just want a slice of the pie, for my part.
Just a little piece.
It's a little piece for the part that I'm doing. So I do think that this is good, and we'll see what comes of it.
I have a question before I cut you loose. How much trouble would I get you in if I got you to do a Go Devils right now? I mean, is that like, can you even throw up a pitchfork right now? Or are you going to be?
Man, I throw up a pitchfork? Come on, man. Can I throw up a pitch? Sparky is tattooed on me. I'm a Sun Devil for life, so
I love
that'll never change.
You got me in the heart. Gary Chambers, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, man. Thank you so much for having me, man. I appreciate you calling me up.